Greetings everybody from Southeast Asia. We're currently in Bangkok, Thailand. We actually just came from China just to see some family. And honestly, as you can imagine, I wasn't intending on making any videos out here because I was solely focused on enjoying the holiday. But alas, I have had messages about this particular topic. Why not just talk about it once and for all? So here we are today about this whole tariff war that has been going on. I literally just came from China. I've grown up in China. I've gone to the markets and know people who run in these kind of circles. They have their own businesses. I do feel like I have some level of credibility to lend to this particular topic. If you want somebody who is a luxury consumer, this might be something that interests you. Obviously, if you have a different perspective, as I always say in my videos, good on you for getting those brain cells working. I don't expect everybody to agree with me because I don't agree with everybody else. So I would absolutely love a respectful discussion down in the comments below. And if you have nothing nice to say, just jog on because I'll do you a favor and block you, but I'm here to share opinions. And that's what I'm assuming, here for as well. There will be layers to this particular topic, and it's actually about me informing you of all the different parts, the pieces of the puzzle, and cutting through all the noise so that you can make an informed judgment, because I promise you this movement isn't as organic as it may seem. So let's talk about what's really going on here. And if I'm looking down, that's because I have some notes on my laptop about this, because I didn't want to just go into this cold. Trump, he's obviously back in office with a bang, and with him comes a revival of the aggressive tariff policy that is targeting China. So his administration had announced plans for tariffs on a broad range of Chinese goods. Obviously, those range from like your EVs, your electric vehicles, electronics, tech components, textiles, many of which are used across the fashion industry. I won't go into just like breaking down all of the numbers because these kind of change day on day. And as I'm reporting things in April, this is the information as I currently have it. Otherwise, this video would also be so long. But as you can imagine, the scale of these tariffs that have been implemented has sparked a wave of tit-for-tat retaliation, shall we say, by the Chinese. And as such, seemingly out of nowhere, a big flurry of activity from Chinese factory owners and so-called insiders have been flooding Western social media with videos claiming that they actually make your luxury bags, not the factories in France, Italy, or wherever, exposing the luxury fashion industry, that they can sell you the same product directly from China for less. And we all know thus far there's been somewhat of a stigma of the label of made in China. When it comes to high street items, that is something that is pretty commonplace. When you get to luxury fashion, that was something that was shocking. It makes you feel as a consumer, if you bought into high-end luxury, that you've been duped into essentially paying thousands of pounds or dollars. But this isn't just a coincidence. As I see it, it's a soft power play, and it's designed deliberately to undermine these Western brands as a result of these tariffs. Also, hand in hand, they are boosting sales from these Chinese businesses before the full effects of those tariffs kick in, which I believe is sometime in the end of May, if I'm not mistaken. Remember, China, for all of its wonderful benefits and redeeming qualities, it is a dictatorship, okay? The Chinese government does not just let anybody push their agenda through their very heavily controlled social media. And let's just talk about one creator in particular. He's this just normal Chinese man, right? He's, I think, one of the main ones who's speaking in English to you. And he's actually showing videos of himself in a bag production facility surrounded by seemingly Hermes bags. And he's suggesting that that is the same exact factory that those particular brands are using. But he doesn't actually show you the contracts. He doesn't cite the production orders. So that in itself is a big telltale sign that the things that he's saying are not as they seem. And another woman who is also, on the similar lines of sharing and exposing these Chinese production secrets, she actually claims that Lululemon leggings are made in her production facility. So she's just standing there in the middle telling you that the luxury brands are essentially just adding logos to her generic product, again, with zero third-party verification, no papers presented, no evidence. And also, may I just mention to you that up until this point, had you seen those two individuals ever before in your life? Have they brought any kind of brand credibility and built any kind of relationship with you? No, they just popped out of obscurity. No real receipts apart from obviously showing you some replicas, but you can't exactly feel and smell and decide for yourself, can you? It's through a screen. From my perspective, these are very clearly marketing campaigns to essentially say, you can buy it from me, because that was ultimately the end message of don't buy from the US, buy directly from the supplier. That is a huge giveaway. And even if you were not a believer at this stage and you still think the Chinese are doing it out of the goodness of their heart to expose a lie that we have been on for decades, which might I add, we all know brands use, workers or certain component parts and they source them from China. That is no secret, right? But a lie of this scale would be something that you would have heard of by now. One thing that you still have to ask yourself is why now? Why didn't these videos exist last year? Because this is such a big lie. This could have come out at any time. And the answer to that is because now there's a commercial incentive to redirect purchasing behavior before those tariffs make exporting those items more expensive for China. So it's about cutting out the middleman essentially. And the middleman happens to be the luxury brands that are ripping you off. So now that we've cleared up that particular context, this is where it gets a lot more interesting. Even up until this point, even though we've asked those questions, right? Who do you think is buying the most luxury in the world right now? It may surprise some of you that it is not the West, as those videos like to make out. It's actually Asia, and it's led predominantly by China. China accounts for over 40% of global luxury sales, and I'm sure you could find multiple other reports and studies that can also attest to that fact. With that in mind then, if Chinese consumers who live closest to the so-called source are still lining up for the so-called scam items, then why is it only Western TikTokers and Instagram users that are being so-called duped? Wouldn't they just be duping themselves? Because even within China, it's clear that aspirational luxury is alive and well. Because something that I really want to talk about with that important context setting in mind is the global supply chain. And what I personally find to be the supply chain myth that luxury goods must all be produced in China. Of course, there are some component parts of luxury items that are going to be sourced or partially assembled in China. Even if those parts are not sourced from China, sometimes the laborers are, sad to say, sourced from those countries. And we've seen that most recently with the Dior scandal that happened in Italy. Certain Dior bags, I think it was namely the book tote, had been labelled with made in Italy, but they were actually produced in Tuscan factories with Chinese workers that were basically moved there, and they were living in super dire working conditions. It was terrible. There was a huge expose about it, right? That was something that was obviously very, very shady, very significant fallout that happened. They are very regulated in this industry, and the TikToks won't go into this detail, obviously. The EU disclosure laws in particular that pertain to luxury brands, the international trade agreements, are very, very strict, and they are subject to criminal penalties for misrepresenting supply chains. So if LVMH really were found to be slapping made in France, made in Italy labels on their products that are made in Guangzhou or Shenzhen in China, they would face so many class action lawsuits, it's unreal. And they would also have jail time for their executives. And not to mention the fact that they are also publicly traded companies, the majority of them, right? They have shareholders, they have legal obligations, they go through auditing as well, and they have to produce annual reports, sustainability surveys. If they lie, they can get sued big time. And of course, you can cross-reference the following documents, the LVMH annual report. You've also got the Kering Group supply chain report, which is very, very good. In fact, there is a really good screen grab that I want to share with you, which is essentially where they get all of their preferred sources for precious skins. So your exotic skins like your ostrich, your alligator, your Nile crocodile. They all list the markets, and none of them are China. You can also go and find the Hermes Manufacturing Transparency report. They have to talk about it, especially if they are publicly traded. But I know even after all of this information, some of you out there will just be completely gung-ho against luxury brands. There will always be those who are just so anti-luxury, and they will just disregard all of these facts because of their feelings around it. Some people just don't like luxury, and there will be certain psychological reasons for it. I'm sure it could be envy, it could be around greed, it could be personal experience that they've had. They just don't like it. It's just not their interest. If you don't like luxury, I mean, none of this, I suppose, will matter to you. But if you're trying to get on a high horse to a degree and say, look, you luxury lovers are so duped, I have news for you. That is definitely not the case for a lot of us out there. We know marketing is part of the plan, but what we buy luxury for is instead design heritage, craftsmanship, resale value, customer experience, and brand identity. And most important of all, it's because we want to. Apart from the 1%, for us, it's a big sum of money that we think a lot about before making that purchase. And ultimately, if we buy a bag for that price, but use it every single day for the next 10, 20 years and it does not break, could even become an heirloom of some sorts for the next generation, then wouldn't you say that it was worth the spend? Think about how many fast fashion items get worn once or twice and then get tossed after a few uses or a couple of years. And just on that particular point around fast fashion, it's so ironic. The individuals that see these 30-second videos and will go onto channels like mine or other people who like luxury fashion will call us duped and say that we're supporting, very predatory industry. Meanwhile, they buy from Temu, they buy from Primark. Their phones are all assembled and manufactured in China anyway, under some very brutal working conditions. I think they even had suicide nets in some Apple factories. It's highly ironic that people want to start talking about ethical and sustainable practices when actually some of the most ethical and sustainable are probably those luxury fashion houses because they are heavily regulated. So I think it is kind of the pot calling the kettle black in many ways, and it's just highly ironic to me because actually for a lot of people who buy luxury fashion, they are very discerning customers. Yes, some of them may appear vapid and come on and create channels where they're just like, look at this new shiny object, look at that. But I'm certainly not one of those individuals. I seldom buy it anymore now because I do have a vast collection and I don't believe personally in materialism just for materialism's sake, but I have wonderful fond memories attached to various luxury items. I worked hard for those items, and ultimately because I had those things attached to it, I treat those items well. They will last longer than those Temu, Shein items, and they are things that I am proud to have in my collection because frankly, it's none of anyone else's business what brings me joy, what I spend my hard-earned money on. We know exactly what we're buying into, but because we buy of a certain level, we also know that the practices around ethics and sustainability will often be a lot better than some random TikToker that is suddenly on your For You page. Do you honestly believe that their working conditions are any better than some of those Western brands? They're probably worse. Now, am I saying that luxury brands are innocent? Of course not. The Dior example is just one of many exposés that have legitimately happened. Real change needs to happen within these luxury brands and the industry as a whole, even further afield. But the solution isn't to go and buy dupes and fakes and pretending that you're $80 Walmart Birkin handbag is an ethical alternative. So let's just talk very quickly about replicas and dupes. They feel very justified and emboldened in buying counterfeit products. Obviously, first and foremost, it's a criminal activity. Many countries, including France, most notoriously have passed legislation that if you are caught with counterfeits, you can face criminal prosecution. And second of all, they fund real crime. Counterfeit goods, as I've covered in many other videos, are often linked to human trafficking, drug smuggling, organized crime rings, amongst other ethical exploits like poor working conditions, long hours. So no, it's not harmless to buy a cute DHgate bag. And no, it's not a protest either. You are still, if anything, feeding the luxury machine just from the underground by protesting buying a real overpriced luxury handbag like your Hermes Birkin or Kelly for a counterfeit one. You are not saying, Hermes is evil, screw you Hermes. You are ultimately saying that you still want to flex, but just at a discount. So you're not sticking two fingers up at a brand, you're actually providing them with free marketing because you have a billboard on your arm. And typically when I don't like something or someone, I don't plaster my whole body in that particular brand. And actually the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. So if you truly do not like luxury brands and you truly think it's despicable, the best thing to do is just not buy them. My personal opinion, outside the criminality and all of that business, is that non-branded designer is probably a better choice. You know, supporting local artisans, local brands, or a niche designer. You know, one of my most loved handbags is my Monar handbag. Here it is. I use it all the time. It's the Monar Gabrielle clutch, right? It is about £3,500, fraction of the price if you think about it, compared to a Chanel classic flap or an Hermes Birkin Kelly. And it's a very practical alternative to those brands, but with a very classic silhouette and a very respected fashion house. They have a real emphasis on craftsmanship, and they do have factories in France, in Europe. And so to basically say from watching a few TikTok videos that must all be wrong, they couldn't possibly have a single factory, I think is a bit oversimplified. And ultimately, if you believe what I personally think is propaganda to a degree, you're not somebody who, frankly, is a smart person. Because a smart person would do research, they'd look at the annual reports, they'd go on to more news outlets, and they do their due diligence, and not just to indulge possibly an inherent bias that you've been fed. I understand how it could possibly look for people to be unboxing luxury item after luxury items, because ultimately we have a widening wealth gap in Western world at the moment. We have inflation, cost of living, etc. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that luxury is void of crimes, because it's certainly not, and I have my personal gripes with it. But I'm not going to also pretend that I don't like certain luxury items, because I do. I like the design, I like the heritage, and I do genuinely like the craftsmanship. A lot of my luxury items have had zero peeling, zero cracking and whatnot. Whereas when you buy into, you know, faux leather or, you know, fast fashion, they're all plastic essentially. You're inhaling the fumes, and they don't have any kind of standards or more relaxed standards in that side of the world, right? I should know because I've been to the particular markets that are on the streets of China, and they don't look legitimate at all. And they also have a weird smell, guys. Obviously, when you see that reel or the videos from TikTok, you know, you get a sense, wow, these factories are amazing. But if you truly stepped into those markets, if you truly look closely and held those items, you would understand very quickly that only a very small percentage would count as super fakes. The rest are just bad rip-offs. So no, it's not just outside the criminality. They're also very poorly made a lot of the time because they want to churn out fast, right? Indulge in it like they do with fast fashion and just buy the next one and buy the next one, right? They're not made to last, so they're obviously therefore priced that way as well. If anything, you should support local. Stop pretending that a replica is morally superior. It's just cheaper, that's all. And actually what you're doing is stroking the egos of those luxury brands. If anything, you're the ones that are being duped because you think that you'll have a slice of the luxury at a cheaper price. But a lot of it is around the experience and the champagne and the cheese and the coffees and the beautiful packaging and being treated very nicely, not going through some sort of back alley of a random market somewhere. Like if my items break, I've popped into like Louis Vuitton or Chanel and I've gotten stuff fixed. Can you do that? Some random market? No, you cannot. Let's end on some final thoughts because we've gone on for far too long already. These viral videos are first and foremost content marketing, and they're awfully convenient in terms of their timing, and they're being amplified by people who already dislike luxury. Is this random man on China that I've never seen before, is he credible? Ask yourself the following questions. 1, why am I seeing this type of video now? 2, who gains from this narrative? And 3, where is the third-party verification of these so-called facts? One of the voices that I've particularly liked the most is Tanner Leatherstein, who I'm sure a lot of you in the community will know about. He released several videos on this particular topic, also while he was on holiday as well. These factories that Hermes, Chanel, Prada, Gucci, whatever, are purporting to have, they do exist, and they have to exist for legal reasons. They cut out the middleman of China in terms of supply chain, because ultimately his video broke down the cost of, I think it was like a leather wallet and a folio that he got quotes for in China and in Spain, and they came out pretty much the same, except you don't have to pay the shipping costs, whereas in Spain it's geographically closer to you, right? Especially if you're a European brand. So he has a really good set of videos on this. But anyways, this is a very developing geopolitical and economic story. Keep that in mind, do your own research as well. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts down below. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one.